Okay, we're back in business. Part B. This what I'm about to talk about is connected to this being a replacement stem that was made at some point in the past. In addition to the characteristics that I pointed out, something that loudly speaks to this being a replacement is that the shank was modified in order to achieve a level fit. In other words, whoever made this took the lazy way out and did not reduce the size of the stem till it matched the shank, but rather the other way around. And wood's much easier to deal with than this hard stuff. So that's typically the way it was done, and I guess is still done by a lot of people. And it doesn't matter one bit if you grind on the shank, if it's an inexpensive pipe, if it's a tobacco access device, and that's, you just want a fresh stem on it and continue to smoke it, and you don't admire them for their historical significance and so on, grind away. It's a far faster way to do it. But if it's a collectible, a rare piece, you don't want to be doing that. Of course, the guy that did this may have been 50 years ago it was done, so we don't know. But how that you can tell that that happened, and I'll get into a little more Dunhill arcana here. Notice the texture toward the end of the shank here, and compare it with the texture in this part. And you'll notice this is a softened aspect to it, and you can see little grain lines going at 90 degrees to these large grooves. And if you get over here, it looks like a smooth portion of wood that then just had a little routing tool, kind of like this thing that was spinning in a dental drill or something and just pushed through there. Well, that's exactly what happened. Now, the repairman that made this replica stem, or this a replacement stem in years ago, did he gets an A for effort, but I'm only going to give him a C- on execution because it should not be obvious. And he probably knew that Dunhill actually did things that way, which is literally true. People think that all their shells and tan shells were blasted and left alone. That's not how they made them. They would actually level the blast a little bit and then retexture it by hand, but they did it very skillfully. Now you can usually tell when you know what you're looking for, but they managed to camouflage it really well. Whereas this guy just did he performed the task, but not with tremendous skill. So, and what we're left with is something that's going to be interesting to work with here, in that the shank, now it's very difficult to see because of just the nature of video and all that kind of stuff, so I've drawn it for you here. Here's a top view of this same pipe we're working with here. And where you see the black, all right, there's some very thin lines that I drew that are like the ideal shape if the pipe were a smooth. There we go. If the pipe were smooth, that was how it came out with the thin black lines. And the lumpy lines here are the sandblast. That's been induced by the deviations inherent in briar when you blast it with sand at high speed. And the red is any place that it dipped below the line, and the black is anywhere that it went above the line. And when you look at this pipe, it's just about like that. The lines wiggle along but keep going in the same net direction until it's about 70% of the way there. 65 maybe. And suddenly everything ducks below the line and it tapers. And that's a problem because it looks wrong. It's a clear indication that the pipe's stem was replaced and it doesn't look original anymore. So what we're going to do, since it's not impossible, but it's pretty difficult to go patching wood into all four sides of a square shank, which it could be done, but it's far less traumatic, we'll say, for the pipe. It wouldn't take many hours, but just a short time. We're going to reduce the peaks. We're going to take we're going to lower I call it lower, even though that line's going up. We're going to reduce the width of the shank. Now, not on the looking at it from this direction, but only from the top view, and it's not necessary from the side. All that we want to do is get rid of this bulge here, and in effect, lower this so that it goes like that and maintains the same directional line so that when we put a new stem on there, it becomes an extension that doesn't get a wasp waist type of thing going on. When the stem is finished, it doesn't suddenly pinch down and then broaden again, and that looks horrible. Especially, this is a geometric design, and it would look singularly bad if we did it that way. So we're going to gently, with great delicacy, we're going to reduce the width of the flare on this. See, this is bladed almost. There's very sharp edges here. So we don't have to remove wood that would be significant in a structural sense. We're just going to be changing that profile. So when you look at the pipe the way people tend to from the side and from the bottom and the top, it'll look like it just runs straight down and into the stem the way it's supposed to. Also, I will soften and maybe modify some, and then definitely using these little magic brushes I've talked about before, the 3M bristle brushes, and soften the edges on this hand etching so that it looks convincing. It looks like sandblast. Alrighty then. So another thing I'm not going to do in this project, or in this video rather, is show you yet again how I cut a tenon. You've been there, done that at least twice, and besides being a fundamental, I don't want any of this to have a padded feel like I'm keep repeating myself in these videos. So look at the titles of the previous installments and you can quickly locate a video where I've made a tenon. And contributing to that decision is that the kind of tools that I use for tenon cutting are ones that not many of you already have. It's custom tooling. Most of you use a lathe, and so you'd be seeing something that you're already good with. On the one hand, if I cut, I don't know yet if I'm going to make this on a lathe. I think I might to get that shoulder that we're talking about. But you're already proficient with a lathe, or you wouldn't be watching these videos. And if you're a drill press kind of a guy, you're not using the same equipment that I am because it's one of a kind. So managed to confuse myself and probably you with that explanation, but that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So when I come back, when we turn the camera on again, this will have been slightly narrowed in its fattest parts, and you'll see some blonde wood. And I may or may not do, well, I might do that live. Why not? I think I'll do that live. But there'll already be a tenon on the end of this piece of rod stock, and I will have already, the mortise, as is the case with most old pipes with thin-walled shanks, it's significantly blown out. It's trumpet-shaped, so that has to be cleaned up and squared up using chucking reamers. But I've already done that several, maybe 3 times on these video series, so I don't want to keep beating that drum. So the mortise will be squared away, the tenon will be cut, and then we'll jump into actually doing, you can actually watch me modify the exterior of this shank to get the texture to match the sandblast elsewhere. So that is it. It's going to be fun. I'll be back in a bit.